Hey there, Canonites, what a time to be alive, am I right? Both IGN and GameInformer have released a ton of details on and plenty of footage of Halo Infinite's campaign, and as I'm sure you've been expecting, I'm here to break everything down that we learned. Before we dive in though, I do need to make two caveats. First, I'll mainly be using campaign footage 343 themselves have released when I need to, along with screenshots from the videos that I'm referencing. Otherwise, I'll be using footage from previous games. In other words, I'm not going to be using video clips for the most part. Second, this information does have potential spoilers, and I mean big stuff. Nothing about the end of the game, but some stuff might be considered pretty spoilery, so continue at your own peril. For those of you ready to press forward, however, let's dive in. And again, spoilers ahead. Between all the IGN and GameInformer articles and videos, we get a pretty good idea of how the game opens. As it turns out, the game actually opens with the Infinity being boarded and the Chief thrown into space by Atriox himself. After that, Infinity crashes into the ring, leaving several dead and several more scattered. 6 months later, the pilot finds the Chief. So yeah, Infinity is out of the picture. Maybe it was only severely damaged, maybe it'll return somehow later in the game, but whatever the case, I just don't want Infinity to be brushed aside and dealt with before the game even starts. A lot about Infinite already feels like it's just tossing aside elements of 343's Halo that didn't have an overall positive reception. GameInformer were even directly told that there are no Prometheans in this game, so anyone who was hoping they might make an 11th hour debut, we're shit out of luck. I can only hope the same fate doesn't await the Infinity. Moving forward, the Chief is of course recovered by the pilot and the game begins. IGN's footage gives us a look at some of the now updated opening, including a bit of nostalgia bait that honestly made me cringe a bit.
I need a weapon.
Yep, in place of the great "we need to fight" line from 2019, we get a pointless bit of nostalgia bait. This isn't the only time this happens either, with the weapon apparently breaking out the "just dust and echoes" line later on. I can't say I'm particularly excited about either of those. Anyway, as we know from the E3 footage earlier this year, after arming himself with a pistol, the Chief exits the Pelican, making his way through debris and bodies before arriving at a new ship, a banished vessel known as Warship Gabrakan. This opening, reminiscent of the Pillar of Autumn from Halo CE, introduces fans to the basic of Halo Infinite's gameplay, and ends with the Chief destroying the ship before he makes his way to Zeta Halo. Escorted by the pilot, the Chief's first goal after destroying the banished warship is to recover the AI known as the Weapon. Once he does, the new pair begin making for Zeta Halo's surface when they encounter Tremonius and we get our first boss fight. Boss fights in Infinite are noted as a huge improvement over previous games. According to a talk IGN had with some of Halo's developers, boss AI are unique, building off an underlying set of behaviors with more unique elements added atop so they'll stand out. A lot of these bosses also have unique weapons. In the case of Okro Vagadoon, a name you may recognize, the Blade Master wields a special energy sword. Once Okro and his crew are defeated, you can actually summon his unique sword at a forward operating base, or FOB, for use in other encounters. We'll talk more about this specifically in just a bit. After the fight with Tremonius, players will soon find themselves on Zeta Halo's surface and the game truly begins. Since it was announced, fans have had a notion of an open-world Halo title in their heads, and not without good reason. While 343 have deliberately avoided calling the game open world, Infinite does seem to be at least open world-esque. The world of Zeta Halo is broken up into larger spaces, and as the game progresses, players will have access to new areas of the ring and the ability to revisit older locations. In a lot of ways, this is an evolution of ideas from Halo 3 ODST, though on a larger scale. Starting the game up, players are put on a rather linear path to the first level. After that first level, the city begins to open up, and players can revisit old sections as they please. Obviously, Halo Infinite dials everything up compared to ODST. The world of Halo Infinite is described as smaller than something you might expect to see from an Assassin's Creed game, which is likely good for Halo's formula. Open world games can easily suffer from having too much busy work, far too much open space. In the case of Halo Infinite, it seems that 343 have managed to strike an ideal balance between Halo's traditional idea of a golden path for players to experience the game and concepts borrowed from open world games. And when the world of Halo Infinite opens up to the player, they have a variety of objectives they can engage with. There are main story objectives alongside optional ones, such as Marine squad rescues, banished bases to eliminate, bosses to fight, and of course, the forward operating bases. We've touched on these, but in short, they are UNSC bases that the Chief can liberate across the ring. Once liberated, they provide the Chief with a number of resources, such as fast travel locations and places from which to call in ordnance and reinforcements. Weapons used by defeated bosses, vehicles, and even Marines are all available once you unlock more bases. Players will also receive a new thing called Valor as they free forward operating bases and other UNSC resources on the ring. As a player earns more Valor, more ordnance and reinforcements become available to them. Going back to ODST once more, these FOBs sound a lot like weapon caches players could unlock as they found more audio logs. And speaking of audio logs, these are an item we've known would be part of Infinite for a while, collectibles that will additionally flesh out the game's backstory alongside the main narrative. We can spot a player grabbing one in IGN's campaign footage, and interestingly, it's labeled as a UNSC audio log. I can't help but wonder if there are different types of audio logs, just like we had in Halo 5. Another new collectible for Infinite are Spartan cores, which are used to upgrade the Master Chief's equipment. While the upgrade cores are often found off the beaten path, the equipment that the Chief collects as the game progresses, threat sensor, thruster, etc., are recovered from the bodies of fallen Spartans along the game's main golden path. So, players won't be missing out on any piece of equipment if they ignore the other options available in Infinite, but they would miss out on the Spartan cores that let them enhance that equipment. As the Chief makes his way across Zeta Halo, he'll be opposed by the Banished, and while we recently got tons of detail on Banished forces, the gameplay today revealed some new information. Perhaps most exciting of all is the reveal of skirmishers returning. We don't see them often, but they appear a couple times between IGN and GameInformer. It's great to see them returned, and I can't wait to fight them again. We also get a look at some new enemy behavior in this footage, such as Jackals turning their shields or elites powering up their shields once an ally is killed. That latter feature has me particularly excited to try and kill an elite before its shields activate. While the surface of Halo Infinite is teeming with encounters to engage in and places to explore, we'll also be diving into the ring's underbelly at times. These instances, referred to by 343 themselves as dungeons, present more traditional, crafted Halo experiences alongside the new open-world elements. A new feature in Halo Infinite will be its use of the camera. Like God of War 2018, the game is designed to be a single continuous shot. Despite this, 343 will have ways to transition to other points of view, such as this argument between Banished leadership including Eshram and Jagar Odamnai, who is apparently an old friend of Eshram, incidentally. As we come to a close, there were some additional details that just didn't flow into the main video, so we'll just kind of hit on these in quick succession. Heroic will be no walk in the park, according to IGN. There's a new scanning tool to help find collectibles and objectives, but it has a limited range. This was the yellow scan that we saw in the July 2020 footage last year. The Flood are said to be alluded to but don't appear, at least not in the first 4 hours. I personally doubt that they'll be an active presence in this game at all. According to IGN, Halo Infinite's story early on does rely on knowledge of past games, which IGN said might not make the game the best jumping on point. I'm going to guess that a lot of the context is filled in as the game continues. Games very rarely explain everything in the early hours of the story. That's often reserved just for setting up the mystery. Speaking of, while Cortana isn't a direct presence early in the game, her fate is a consistent part of Halo Infinite's core. The campaign will have its own loot caves with powerful variations on existing weapons. We get to spot an updated version of the shield recharge, which isn't as bad as the original was but remains rather uninteresting, but there's only so much one can do without creating too much additional work. Fusion coils can go unstable and explode just like Halo 2's Ghosts. The threat sensor can apparently reveal cloaked enemies and is rather important on Legendary, at least according to Joe Staten. There's a scene recreating the first meeting between Cortana and the Chief, though it seems to be a reinterpretation rather than a historical record, as none of the dialogue in this scene come from the Fall of Reach. We'll have to see how that plays out. There's an interesting scene of the Chief and the weapon looking at some unknown holographic display. It kinda looks like a Halo activating, but I have no idea exactly what I'm looking at here. Not that that's a bad thing, I'm looking forward to identifying that when I actually get to play the campaign. Finally, in GameInformer's coverage of the campaign, they note that towards the end of their playthrough, the Chief starts hearing voices. While I doubt it, I would love if this were tied back to the events of Halo 4 at some point.
The mantle of responsibility for the galaxy shelters all human, but only the Forerunners are its masters.
Cortana, where's this coming from?
Where's what coming from?
The Didact's voice.
I'm not picking up anything, Chief.
But that wraps up my breakdown of this latest footage and the details that were revealed. Personally, while I'm more excited than ever to actually play this campaign, This news has done little to dissuade my concerns about the story. No Prometheans has me worried about this entire created conflict just being swept under the rug after this game, assuming it hasn't been done so by the game's start. I'm extremely worried about what will happen to the Infinity, as well as 343's characters, and while there were some interesting moments, my hesitation about this game's story remains. But that's just me for now. I know a lot of this probably sounds really exciting to a good portion of the community. Infinite will be fun, but the story remains a point of contention for me. As always though, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, stick around for that Patreon shoutout, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our Horospus patrons. First, there's Hope, then we have Freight, Discombobulated Sycophant, Justin Montgomery, Man in the Dark, Keisha Dila, Daddy Anarchy, Great Scott Productions, Jumpy Sucks Balls, and Lone Ronin 117. Thank you all for your amazing support of the channel. Next, I'd like to thank our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shout out, check out patreon.com/halocanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind the scenes materials, including raw audio for upcoming videos, or even shoutouts like this. All patrons now get early access to certain videos as well, and more benefits are to come. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. If you really enjoy this, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.